For joining us at the table today, U.S. Representative Buddy Carter from Georgia's 1st District. As we enjoy our conversation, Congressman, we're going to talk about a couple of bills that I know you're working on, your office says are important. We'll talk about those in a moment. First, tell me your reaction this week. Lots of activity after an indictment last week, and then the former President Trump turning himself in Georgia.
Yeah, it's, you know, somewhat embarrassing, to be quite honest with you. I mean, here we have a former president yet again indicted by a judicial system that seems to be weighed against him. I mean, look, in the state of Georgia, Fulton County has long been a bastion for Democratic shenanigans, and we've understood that, and we've experienced that, and now we're experiencing it again. Look, everyone has a right to protest an election, and it happens all the time. It happened here in Florida when Al Gore and George Bush, you'll remember that. It happened again with Hillary Clinton in 2016. It happened again in 2018 in Georgia with Stacy Abrams. She claimed that there was malfeasance in the election system during that time. Yet there were no indictments then. And now we have these indictments, and, you know, there seems to be a two-tiered judicial system here in America now. There seems to be one judicial system for if your name is Biden or Clinton, and another if you're anyone else. And that's really a shame. Now, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of good people in the Department of Justice, a lot of good people in the FBI. But both of those agencies seem to have been politicized and against conservatives, and that's unfortunate, and we need to weed that out. We need to weed those bad apples out. There are bad apples in every organization, and they need to go. But it's really unfortunate that this has happened, but they will have their day in court. We are in America, and you are innocent until proven guilty, so they will have their day in court. But this seems to be more about revenge than it does about justice.
Is that because of the timing, or do you think that there really was nothing criminally that should be prosecuted?
I think it's going to be very difficult to prove that there was anything criminally that can be prosecuted. Again, we have freedom of speech, and we have the right to protest an election if we feel like there were wrongdoings in that election. It's been done before, but there weren't indictments then. I mean, you know, it seems that against the former president, 91 counts total. There were only 13 counts against the Unabomber. I mean, this seems to be a system weighed against the former president, and it's really unfortunate, really sad in our country.
Well, let me ask this. I want to show a graphic here. It's a quote from Georgia's Governor Brian Kemp after the indictments just a week ago. He said, "The 2020 election in Georgia was not stolen. For nearly 3 years now, anyone with evidence of fraud has failed to come forward under oath and prove anything in a court of law. Our elections in Georgia are secure, accessible, and fair, and will continue to be as long as I'm governor." So do you agree with the governor's stance here? Was Joe Biden legitimately elected, at least as far as Georgia was concerned, in 2020?
I don't know whether there was fraud, whether there was anything unlawful during that election. And I have resolved that I will probably never know. But I do know that significant changes were made to the voting system in the state of Georgia with the Election Integrity Act by the Georgia State Legislature that resulted in significant and substantial changes to the voting system that I think made the voting easier and that made cheating harder. And I applaud them for doing that. That should have been done, and it was done. So whether there was anything that happened then, I do not know that. I have acknowledged that Joe Biden is president of the United States, and I have pledged to work with him. Unfortunately, this administration has not wanted to work in a bipartisan fashion, but we continue to try our best to work with this administration.
So, final question on this topic, we'll move on, but you mentioned Stacy Abrams. So even the folks who said, hey, I'm not sure that I think this happened right, but nobody went that extra step of a phone call to the Secretary of State and said, find me the votes to win. Aren't those different things?
Well, they're different, but then again, they're the same thing. Both of them were protesting the election, and both of them were questioning the results of the election. But what's the difference? One of them turned it into an indictment, and another one didn't. But everyone has the right to question that. We have freedom of speech here in America. So this will play out in the courts, and we'll see what will happen. And I'm one who believes that justice will prevail.
Let's talk a little bit, Congressman, about some legislation. Specifically, I saw the Passport Modernization Act. So what does this bipartisan bill do? Why is this needed even?
Listen, we, and I suspect all congressional offices throughout the country, have been inundated with requests for passports as we've we are post-pandemic now, people wanting to travel and get out, and they are realizing now that in many cases their passports have expired or they can't find their passport. Our office has just been inundated with the request, and this is a bipartisan bill, as you mentioned, that will give the Department of State more latitude in hiring more people and to deal with the passports and to see how they can modernize their systems.
Are you reading my mail? Because, yes, I reached out to my congressman this summer to say, hey, I'm having a hard time getting the passport. I know a lot of folks who have kind of walked through this. One of the other bills I saw you talking about concerns protecting right whales and safety regulations. What is this about?
Well, NOAA has proposed a rule that would limit the speed of recreational recreational boats, as well as any boat between 35 and 65 feet. And during the right whale mating season, which is 7 months out of the year on the Atlantic coast, it would limit it to 11.5 miles per hour. Look, we all care about the right whales. We all want to protect them. We don't want to see them go extinct. We live on the coast because we love the coast and we love the environment, and all of us agree with that. However, this is short-sighted, and this would potentially crush recreational fishing and have a negative impact on our ports. And the Georgia ports are the economic engine of the Southeast United States. We cannot afford to do that. Not only that, but it would endanger these boats. It would endanger them and put them in a situation where they may actually capsize if they don't have the ability to go more than 11.5 miles an hour. How are you going to enforce it?
So if somebody's watching and they're not a boater, how does that play out? Lowering the speed is dangerous. I think a lot of people would not necessarily understand that.
Yeah, well, lowering the speed is dangerous because, you know, when you're talking about a mariner being on the water, there are going to be times when you have to speed up. And if you're limited to 11.5 miles an hour, that's going to slow the bar pilots and the harbors, which will slow what they're doing and trying to get the cargo through. That's going to have a negative impact.
You don't have the
absolutely, and not only that, but they've also shown that it would, you know, there's less than a 1 in a million chance that one of these boats will hit a right whale. And there's other technology available. That's what we need to keep in mind. There's technology out there available, sensors on buoys, AI, which is a big subject now here in Washington, D.C., artificial intelligence. I was in Canada a couple of months ago and met with Meta Canada, the Facebook portion of Canada up there, and they were telling us that they have the ability and the technology now where they can identify those whales without having to tag them. They can identify and tell where they're at. Well, you know, look, I was a small businessman for 32 years.
Use some of that instead of potentially some
again, as a small businessman, you know, you had to be smart. You got to be smarter than them, and there's other ways we can do this without crushing the recreational and then the harbor pilots.
U.S. Representative Buddy Carter from Georgia's 1st District. I like how you put that. Thanks for the time today.
Thank you.
All right.